You're listening to the Law Lives Project. I'm your host, Angie Vishianan. I'm a lawyer that launched a startup focused on changing the legal profession through mentorship. Through this podcast, we will explore the early career steps of real lawyers to help students see that many of us didn't have it all figured out at first. It takes time to find your way in the profession, so we want to shed light on some of the challenges people face in the earliest part of building their careers. Each week, I sit down with members of the legal profession and chat with them about the paths they took to get where they are now, including the times they stumbled, the times they fell, and the times they needed a little help. To encourage candor and vulnerability on this show, the attorney guests will remain nameless, but their stories will be laid bare for your consideration.
If you've done any LSAT prep at all, you've probably noticed that getting ready for the LSAT is approximately as much fun as fighting off a pack of feral dogs barehanded. But Velocity LSAT is here to change that for you by making you faster, better, stronger, and also able to outwit any feral dogs in the area. Velocity is the online video course taught by me, Dave Hall, the guy with all the 180s. At Velocity, we guarantee you'll hit the 99th percentile or improve by at least 10 points, or we'll keep working with you until you do. Law Lives listeners can get half off your first month's installment or $100 off a year's subscription. Just enter code LAWLIVES, LAWLIVES, all one word at checkout. Enroll, get more details, and contact info at velocitylsat.com.
Hi, I'm Nefertari, and I'm a sophomore at the University of Central Florida Burnett Honors College. I'm currently interning with Leg Up Legal, and I hope to go to law school after college. Today, I'm talking to an attorney who has experience both as a litigator and as an in-house counsel. We will also talk about his experience in the military and how that has prepared him for his future career in law. Let's get started.
So let's start off with your law school journey. So what were the reasons that you chose to go to law school in the first place?
I've always been interested in the way that our system of government is put together. And my undergrad was in basically poli-sci and international relations. And I've got curious or got more interested in how our system is set up and how it actually works. So that's kind of what got me interested in the beginning of going to law school. You know, sometimes you'll hear people talk about people in their lives that say, oh man, you like to argue, so you should go be a lawyer. And that's not necessarily the case for me. I think it was more kind of understanding how the way that our system is designed and how it all works.
And so how did you pick which law schools you were going to attend?
Basically geographic proximity. I'm kind of a second career lawyer. So I was in the military for 10 years before I went to law school, and so where I was stationed, there were a few law schools around, and I knew some people just kind of vaguely who were lawyers, and they recommended a couple of schools that kind of catered to what I wanted to do. And I didn't really have, we can get into it more, but I didn't really have a good idea about what I wanted to do. I just kind of pictured lawyers as being in courtroom litigators. And so I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I went to a school that was heavily geared toward preparing courtroom litigators.
Yeah, the geographic location's important. I feel like a lot of people tend to not think about that always.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I mean, depending on where you are, it's does mean a move to go to law school. And I was just lucky to have a few in my area.
And what were a few things that you wish you had known before you went to law school?
Oh man, so many things. So many things. I do not come from a family of lawyers. I knew a few lawyers, basically through my work in the military, but I didn't really have a really good sense as to what law school is all about or what the practice of law, especially as a junior person right out of school, was all about. So what I wish I'd done is maybe taken a couple of tours of law schools or talk to current students to see whether or not law school would be a good fit for me, and maybe talk to some recent grads too at that point, because I graduated from law school in 2009 and the market was a little bit rough then, to put it mildly. So maybe get a good sense of, basically what life as a law student is like, and then try to figure out kind of practice areas that I was interested in.
Definitely good advice. And 2009 was an interesting year to graduate in.
Yeah, although 2020 looks like it's going to be even tougher. And I don't know, it just seems to me that law is changing rapidly. And so, maybe the calculus that goes into the decision of whether to go to law school and then where to go might be changing a bit as well.
So if you could have picked a different law school, would you? And why or why not?
Maybe yes. I went to a private law school, and so because I was in the military and where I'm from, there's special deals for state schools if you were in the military. So maybe I would have picked a state law school because financially it would have made a little bit more sense. But no, I mean I really liked the law school that I went to. There were a lot of really good people that graduated from there, and it started because it was private. It started off as kind of a commuter law school, and so there were a lot of non-traditional or kind of night school students who were there as well. And I thought it was really interesting meeting some of those people. I went full time, but it was really cool to meet people who were juggling real careers at the same time they were going to law school.
So to get into like a little deeper of what you did in law school, were you involved in any extracurriculars like moot court or the law review?
Yes. So I was, like I said, the school that I went to was really geared toward litigators, and so I really wanted to. It has a really well known moot court and mock trial program, and I really wanted to get into that. So I was fortunate to do really well in the. They have kind of an intramural, inter-school kind of mock trial competition, and so did really well in that. And then also there was a moot court competition that. And then from those, the intramural competitions, they picked the national teams that would go out and go compete elsewhere. So I got to do that in moot court. I traveled to quite a few places and did moot court while I was in law school, and it was a great experience. I also had the opportunity to write onto a journal, and so it was an international trade journal. And so from my background in the military and living where I live, international trade is a really big deal. And so it was really interesting to be on a journal with some really interesting folks from around the world.
Did you find that being part of those extracurriculars helped you in your career after law school?
I think so. In fact, my first job, there were, I'll never forget one of the last moot court competitions that I was at. There were a couple of partners from the firm that I ended up getting a job with who were sitting there in the audience listening to me give my presentation. So, and at one point, one of the partners got up and left, and I thought, "Oh man, what did I do wrong?" But it turns out he just had to go take a phone call. I just thought it was funny. More broadly, I think those kinds of activities kind of help make the practice of law real, and especially the appellate stuff, the moot court competitions. Thinking deeply about concepts of law, ahead of just getting prepared for, so you won't get called on in torts or whatever. But actually having the ability to think really deeply about an issue of the law and thinking about what makes sense from a public policy perspective and how it would affect, downstream trial judges. It really made the law come alive to me. And so I'm a firm believer that you learn the most by teaching somebody how to do something. And I think that in a moot court competition or a moot court argument, that's basically what you're trying to do, is to kind of lead the appellate judges down the path of your argument. So it helped me to understand the concepts a lot better when I was doing them.
Did you already know that you were going to be working at that firm before the competition?
No, I was lucky enough to get an internship with them during my 2L summer. And actually, I take that back. I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. I think I did know that I was working there already. So yeah, it was. But it was really great to be able to, I don't know, kind of perform in front of a couple of the partners.
Yeah. And so you just mentioned an internship. What jobs, internships, or other activities did you do in the summer between your 1L and 2L year?
I was still in the in the reserve in the military, so I had some service that I had to do during the summer. So I did an internship with the local DA's office in a juvenile court, and then I had the second half of my summer I did clerkship with the firm that I ended up going with. So I was very lucky that to get both of those opportunities. The local DA's office where I live is very active, and the school that I went to kind of feeds a lot of the DAs, the ADAs that work there. So I was really fortunate to get to work with some of them. And then the firm, I was extremely fortunate to get a spot with them, and then ultimately have it turn into a job offer.
So how did you go about finding those opportunities? Did your school help you? Did you find them on your own?
I was lucky to be able to network with some folks that I knew through the military, who knew some people who knew some people who ended up working who had worked for that law firm. So that's how I got my foot in the door. And for the DA's office, they had kind of a general application, and I don't think I knew anybody over there. It was just kind of if you're interested in getting an internship, please come and talk to us. And so I sent my resume over to one of the assistant general counsels over there, and I was lucky enough to get picked to do it. They only take a certain number of interns per year, and I was just fortunate to get it.
Yeah. So what do you think made your application stand out?
I think probably my military background. At that point, I was a bit older than the typical incoming 1L law student or 2L law student,
Right.
I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think that had something to do with it. The other thing was, I started talking to people who there's a rule that says that 3Ls can practice basically, without a license in their 3L year, and so I knew a couple of those folks who were doing that at the DA's office, and that might have helped a little bit as well. But I definitely think it's important to use all the resources that you have at your disposal. So I'm a big proponent of letting people know what it is that you're looking for. So try not to make it too obvious, though. You're like, hey, help me get a job, and instead saying something like, I think for my next role, or for my first role out of law school, I think I really like to work at the DA's office. Do you know anybody in there who could, like, maybe I could talk to get some pointers, instead of just, how can you get me a job over at the DA's office? There's a way to phrase it, but certainly it's good, I think, to let people know that you're excited and interested about working somewhere, because they're obviously excited about working there, or at least they were at some point.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask, you touched on networking, which is something that's definitely been emphasized a lot lately. And so,
Mhm.
do you have any advice for how people can network, especially like in law school?
In law school, there's opportunities for CLEs, and I didn't know this until I was just about to graduate. But the state bar where I live allows you to attend CLEs basically free, and
Mm.
you can also use those CLE credits. I think you can accumulate them, at least where I live. You can accumulate those before you graduate. And that's a great thing. I mean, if you can get a lot of free CLE credit, number one, it helps you, especially when you're first starting out, because if you're not working for a firm or a company that will pay for you to go to CLE, that's money out of your pocket that you don't have to spend. The other thing is that it lets you meet or interact with real practicing lawyers who are doing, interesting legal work throughout your area. And depending on what your practice area, your intended practice area is, you can also meet people from around the country that do that kind of thing. And you can connect with them on an intellectual basis. You can say, look, I saw your paper that you presented at that CLE, and I thought it was fantastic. And can we talk about it a little bit? Just grab a cup of coffee or do a Zoom or something like that. I think those are the ways. It's kind of like a good way to meet people who are in the business, and to let them know that you are interested as well.
Now, can you just explain what CLE is for anyone who
Yeah,
doesn't know?
sorry. It's continuing legal education. So once you graduate from law school, you can't be sick the day they taught law in law school. Or if you are, then they want to make sure that you get educated along your way as a lawyer. So these are credits that you have to earn each year to keep your license up. And so it varies from state to state. And sometimes there's a legal education component, there's an ethics component, sometimes there's a professionalism component. And so each one of those components requires a certain number of hours. And so you can go to live sessions. You can do things online. You can also do self study through reading articles and bar journals or law reviews and that kind of thing. But all of those credits are required to be completed every year in order to keep your license current. So, what I meant by free CLE credits is, depending on the bar, of course, sometimes they will allow law students who have not graduated yet to attend some of those continuing legal education seminars or do them online for free, and then be able to claim those CLE credits before they graduate. And then once you graduate, depending again upon the bar, some of those credits might roll over from year to year. So you can carry them forth as you go forward in your legal career. When you first start practicing, depending upon what you're doing, you can get very busy and not have time to do some of those CLEs. And so being able to carry those credits forward is a really big deal.
Now, moving into your between your 2L and your 3L year, what did you spend your summer doing then?
At the firm it's a boutique litigation firm. And first day I walked in, they said, I need you to do a memo on this particular legal issue. So I was trying to get set up on Lexis or Westlaw so I could figure out what was going on with this particular legal issue. But it ended up being a big deal. It was for a case that one of the partners was working on. And I learned very quickly at that firm that they did not hand out busy work. It was not something that they were just going to, it wasn't just go and get me coffee, or explain to me how causation works in negligence cases. It was actually a real world item that needed to be finished for them to prepare for trial. And so instantly I was kind of thinking, I kind of felt a little bit of pressure because I was thinking, wow, this is great. But on the other hand, if they're going to rely on this, I better make sure I get it right. On the one hand, it was kind of pressure. Yeah, I kind of felt pressure. On the other hand, I thought, wow, these people trust me enough to come in here and sit down and talk to them about what I think about this legal issue. And I thought, this is fantastic. And it was exactly what I wanted to be doing because I really like being able to help people. That's one of my big motivators. And being at the firm that, helping these practicing lawyers, and some of them are, nationally and internationally renowned for their expertise in their practice area. It was really cool to be able to talk to those folks about it. This issue. And then that's how it started. And then it continued on with getting farther into new cases that came in and really sitting down with the senior partners to hear their thoughts on how we should proceed in a case. And it was fascinating to me to have that it was an integral part of my legal education was learning how those lawyers think and look at a case and evaluate it.
That sounds like a great experience.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, it turned into a job offer afterwards.
So were there any other experiences, connections, or other factors? You've touched on this a little bit, but that helped you obtain like the skills that then led to your first post-law school position?
Definitely moot court, mock trial. I did some volunteer work as well. It wasn't legal related, but I mean, just getting out in the community and helping people. I got some connections with the local food bank and some community organizations that I'd kind of been in touch with in the military. But kind of having that human side as well, like when you're in law school, it is so easy to get kind of bogged down in the books while you're there. I think it's so important to have kind of balance in your life. And so I got in touch with this community organizations that just, things that you do on a weekend or whatever to get food for a food bank or gather donations of clothing and stuff and, for women's shelters or whatever. For me, it wasn't really related to getting me a job, but it was interesting in that some of the people that I knew from the law firm and from the DA's office and from other places, even my law school, were kind of involved in these activities elsewhere. And so just kind of running into them or encountering them in an outside the law kind of experience, it really kind of helped deepen those relationships and kind of connecting with people on a level other than just professionally. And so I think it's important to kind of keep yourself well-rounded and grounded when you're in law school, because it's so easy to kind of get bogged down in the books.
You mentioned that you received your job offer from your internship, so I take it that you didn't have to apply for your first job out after law school, right? It was just straight through from your internship?
It was basically straight through, yeah. And it's funny though, if you treat these internships or clerkships as a summer-long job interview, that's such a good way to kind of approach it, because regardless of what you're doing, even if it's going out to lunch with a couple of the associates that you hadn't really met before, it's part of the interview process. So you have to be on your game, and it's kind of a two-way street. It's not just you on display, it's also you kind of evaluating whether or not these folks are people that you could work with. And so yeah, I think that in that respect, joining that law firm was one of the best hiring experiences I've had, because it was a very good look at everybody that was involved in the business and how they approach the law and how they carry themselves too.
Yeah, I like that idea of it being like a summer-long interview.
Yeah.
So can you generally describe what your practice area or industry was?
Sure. So it was a boutique litigation firm. We did a lot of admiralty and maritime work, which is really interesting, a very niche area of the law that not a whole lot of people do. The people that I worked with, the senior partners at that firm, were some of the biggest names in admiralty and maritime litigation. And so I was very fortunate to learn from them. And also, it's kind of got an interesting alumni network of people who go off to do other things in the maritime business or oil and energy and that kind of thing. So that was a primary focus of the practice. And then I also did general insurance defense. And so I was working with other lawyers from the firm on insurance defense for car wreck cases and personal injuries and things like that. And I also got involved in a couple of criminal defense cases, which was interesting. It wasn't necessarily a huge part of what the firm did, but extremely interesting cases.
And so did you know you were interested in that when you went into law school?
No. And that's, well, I knew that I was interested in doing maritime type stuff because it was related to stuff that I'd done in the military, but criminal prosecution and defense, I kind of always thought that that's where I would end up. When I left the military, I wanted to go and work with people who were public servants, because those are the people that I've been interacting with for years. I gotten to know a couple of people at the local U.S. Attorney's office, and I thought, wow, that'd be great to work with these people, because they were fantastic folks that I mentioned at the beginning that I was really interested in the way our system works and the way that it's set up and how the law works for this, citizens of our country. And so I was really interested in working with those folks, because they seem to have the same kind of servant leadership attitude that I'd gotten in the military. Working at the DA's office, though, it really kind of opened my eyes to what they do on a daily basis. And those folks are dedicated public servants that I really enjoyed working with. So yes, I kind of had the idea of doing that or going into maritime litigation, and luckily I had the experience of doing both of those things.
So would you say that your internships and your experiences outside of the class really helped you decide on that practice area?
I think so. Helped confirm it for sure. The DA's office, I think it was a real eye opener for me. Like I said, those folks work incredibly hard, and they have to deal with some difficult topics every day. And for me, I ultimately decided that it was, as dedicated as they are and as hard as they work, it wasn't quite the right atmosphere for me. And luckily, the firm, I really liked the collegial kind of firm culture of the firm that I was at, where everybody was helping each other out, and working on some difficult topics, and some kind of novel interpretations of existing law, and I really liked that. So it was kind of like a guild mindset. Never really encountered that before, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah. So do you think you made the right choice with the practice area that you picked?
Absolutely. But also, by the same token, I didn't really have exposure to other practice areas. So, I was, like I said, I did not come from a family of lawyers, and I didn't really talk to many lawyers who practice things outside of a couple areas that I mentioned. So, since then, I think that intellectual property is fantastic and exciting. Never really knew much about it, and because nothing in my background would really prepare me to deal or to talk about issues like that. So that was really cool. I think that employment law is interesting, and certainly after I left litigation and went in house, those kinds of topics are things that deal with a little bit, and wish that I had a little bit more of a background in. So the answer is yes, I'm glad that I made the choices that I did, but I also kind of wish that I'd explored some other stuff too. And I don't really think that in law school I had the resources, or I knew of the resources that would allow me to go and do that kind of research, which is funny because all of the resources are right before your eyes. It's just whether or not you take advantage of them.
So what made you switch from litigation to in-house?
I was working on a case with a friend of mine who had gone in house. He had hired the firm to take care of a really tough case for them, and we had resolved it. Came to a really good resolution that that I think everybody was really proud of. And we went out to lunch, he and I said, you know what? Tell me about being in house. What do you think about it? And he was explaining how he thought that it was a much better way to practice, and a better use of his interests and his talents. And I said, I think I might be interested in going in house. If you hear of anybody that's looking for somebody with my kind of background, just put in a good word for me, I guess. And didn't really think much of it. And then about a week later, a recruiter called me and said, "Hey, I got your name from this guy." I said, "Oh yeah, he's a client of ours." And he said, "Okay, well, could you send over your resume, because I think there's something that might be interesting to you." And so I got recruited on the basis of that client's recommendation to go and work in house at a company that was looking for somebody to do transactional work, contract negotiation, contract drafting, reviews, and then general corporate legal matters. So it was not necessarily in my legal background to draft and negotiate contracts, but because of the recommendation of that client, and also my more general background in the military and elsewhere, I was able to be noticed by a company that was looking for my particular skill set. So it was a matter of being both the right place at the right time, but also
Mhm.
letting people that I knew know that I was interested in possibly going in house. So it was just an opportunity that struck right when I was just considering what I was going to do next. The company was was also willing to train somebody, like, and so we did the interview process, and they realized that I was not a transactional lawyer, but uh, but I think based upon the interactions of me with their staff, and likewise, that it made a lot of sense for me to go in-house with them, and I'm very glad that I did.
So what would you say like are the pros and cons of being in litigation versus being in-house and vice versa?
The culture is something that I noticed right away, because when you're at a law firm, especially a boutique law firm, the lawyers are the rock stars, and so everything, you're a profit center. So everything that you do there is with an aim toward providing legal services directly to clients and making money for the firm that way. In-house, it's a different story. So you're a cost center as a member of the legal staff. But the thing that I thought in-house practice would be like is you go to work and you have one client, and that's it. And so it's just, you are working for the company, and the company's interests are your 100% goal. And in-house, it's a little bit different than that. There ends up being a lot of different in-house clients that have a lot of different legal needs, at least at the companies that I've been at, which are kind of smaller and in the oil and energy space. But I thought that was also really exciting. In litigation, you're worried about a particular set of events that have already happened. And so you're gathering information about things that, you're doing an investigation, you're drafting um, legal opinion memos, you're preparing for trial, you're thinking about depositions, you're hiring expert witnesses, and then thinking about a way to present your case in a manner that makes sense. And so I loved that aspect of it. And interacting with your client, especially in some of the litigation matters that I handle at the firm, they bring you in to handle that matter for them. And I was dealing with corporate clients, so they've got their own business to run. They've got their own interests. This is costing them money. It is not something that they want to hear too much about, and they're placing a lot of trust in you and your firm to handle this matter to a good conclusion for them. In-house, on the other hand, there's former colleague of mine. When I asked him what his job was like, he said, "I'm a firefighter. Every single day I come in, I'm fighting fires. What is burning down, or, what's burning now." And so it's a very exciting way to practice law, at least at the companies that I've been at. I know that there are much bigger companies that have kind of you can write memos and sit in your office and think deep thoughts about areas of the law and how they'll affect the company, and that's important too. But for the companies I've been at, it's much different. It's a much smaller kind of collegial group that handles issues as they come up. So it was a fascinating way to practice, and it was different from litigation. But I think my litigation experience directly impacted the way that I handle transactional issues, because I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, okay, this contract or this commercial relationship, we're saying this to them, they're saying that to us. Are we sure that we're all on the same page? And are there any possibilities for us to have a dispute? And if so, let's iron that out right now, because of the expense of going to litigation in the future.
So what are some things that you wish you had known before going into your practice area?
There's a zillion and one lawyers in the world, and every one of them has a different opinion as to how a career path should go. But there's some well-worn paths to being a successful in-house attorney and being a successful litigation attorney. You work your way up from handling very small matters or writing memos to very small matters to working second chair on a trial with a senior partner, and then becoming a junior partner and going out and getting your own business, and then eventually becoming a senior partner, taking over the big clients and sitting on the major cases. And in-house, it's the same way. You start off as a junior attorney, maybe a contract reviewer, and then you get up to an assistant general counsel, associate general counsel, assistant general counsel, a small company, and then a big company. I kind of wish that I understood some of those career path progressions and why they are important. There are certainly ways, areas that are being emphasized more, and it changes from year to year. And certainly 2020 is kind of a crapshoot with respect to what's going to be really important for in-house lawyers or really important for litigation attorneys in the future. But I think that there's the practice of law that's very important. How you write a brief, how you do a motion, how you draft a contract. But then there's also the business of law, which is, how do you gain the level of experience that's necessary to move up to the next rung on the ladder, and doing it in a way that makes you prepared to take on positions of increasing responsibility. It's possible to get a job and have yourself be the general counsel of a company, but if you're a solo person running that legal team, are you really getting the exposure to all the issues that you'd need to go to a bigger kind of company? And the answer is I don't know. Maybe not. If I'd had it to do over again, I would do a lot more research and talk to a lot more people on how that process works, because I think it would kind of help give me some perspective on ways to broaden my practice area and also prepare myself better for increasing roles or responsibilities.
And so what are some things that you think that like even other lawyers don't know about your practice area?
When you're in litigation and at a law firm, in general, you live and die by a billable hour. And it's funny, the firm that I was at had a history book written about it, and it was interesting. So at the end of, I think it's been the past 20 or 30 years that the billable hour has become the de facto standard for how you measure a lawyer's effectiveness or work product. But before that, they would just, they'd come to the end of a matter and just figure out a bill. Yeah, what do you think is fair, and send it out to the client. And I think it's kind of a quaint way to practice. But also, it also requires a lot of trust between you and your client. Like, okay, what do you feel is a good value for our services? And I think that's fantastic. These days, I don't think you get away with that just because of how automated everything is. But I bring that up to say that when you're at a firm, the billable hour trumps everything. So as an associate, you're expected to, count your time every week, every day, every week, every month, and then pass that on to be billed out to the client. So there's a perception when you're in a litigation firm or a firm, especially, that, man, as soon as you get in-house, you don't have to worry about that billable hour thing, and your life is nothing but the grass is greener on the other side. And that is absolutely true, though. I mean, if you don't want to count hours every day, then in-house practice can be good. On the other hand, in-house practice does not begin and end at 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It is a 24/7 operation, especially if you're involved in international operations. So, in working with people that don't understand lawyers, what lawyers do. So people on the commercial side, they want to close deals, and that's what they're there to do. And they want to do it effectively and, of course, within the bounds of the law. But they're kind of impatient because, if their bonus is riding on closing a deal and the lawyer is saying, wait a second, I got to review this contract before we sign it, it starts to create some tension. So if you're at a firm, there's a perception that in-house lawyers are on the golf course all day, every day, and, just kind of, and every once in a while they'll farm some work out to outside counsel to take care of the real lawyering for them. And that's not really the case. The other thing that I think that firm lawyers could benefit from is being able to understand, especially in the corporate environment, being able to understand what it is that the in-house counsel deal with on a regular basis. And it is everything under the sun. It's, building leases. It's also insurance stuff. It's employee matters. It's also, sometimes somebody just walks down the hall and says, hey, can you notarize this for me? Like, well, I don't know. What is it? You have to read it. And if it has nothing to do whatsoever with your job or with your company, you can say, maybe you want to go see a lawyer about that. And this, yeah, I just did. Like, no. And so a lot of it is education about how the law works and what your responsibilities are as an in-house counsel. I say that to say that litigation or firm lawyers would really benefit from talking to in-house counsel about the product that they're looking for. And if I'm asking for 5 sentences to describe your recommendation on a legal issue, that's it. It's basically because as in-house counsel, I have bosses that are looking for a really short summary of an issue and then what our recommendation is or what outside counsel's recommendation is for how to proceed. 5 pages of legal memo is not going to do it for a very busy CEO or a very busy COO who needs something, or a general counsel who's got to go and present a number of different legal issues to the board or to the CEO or whoever. So that's something that would be really important for people to know. By the same token, though, it's really important for corporate counsel to understand that firm lawyers, in order to give a recommendation, they've got to spend some time thinking about it. They've got to spend some time drafting. They've got to spend some time, doing some research and stuff. So you might have asked them for 5 paragraphs or 5 sentences, but those 5 sentences could have taken 3 hours to draft. A healthy understanding and respect on both sides, I think, is important to make the practice of law most efficient.
So what would you say are like the 3 best things about your job? or the practice area?
I would say the three best things. The first one is working with people. I mean, I absolutely love working with really smart people. In the firm perspective, kind of the lawyer guild kind of thing that we had going on, where you could walk down the hall and talk to somebody who's, at least at the firm that I was at, who'd argued before the Supreme Court of the United States several times and won. And you could talk to people who had been practicing law longer than I'd been alive at that point. And and then, getting their perspective. And these are, I mean, I just love talking to really smart people who are mentally flexible. So, they can think deeply about a number of different topics. And that to me is the magic of going to law school, and the magic of working with lawyers, is that they are paid to consider, or they're trained to consider, all of the various sides of an issue and not necessarily jump to a conclusion. That's why I think that, when people say, oh, you like to argue, you should go to law school, it's not necessarily the case, or it's not what attracts me to lawyers. It's the fact that they are able to think about things on a deep level, and to apply logical reasoning to come up with an opinion. So that was the best thing about working at a firm. The other thing was that at a firm, you're working together toward a common goal, and sometimes it's just you and a partner, and sometimes it's just you if you are the partner, or if you're a senior associate handling your own case. But there really is kind of the freedom to kind of be the captain of the ship and say, where do we want to go with this case, and how do I want to recommend that we settle this, or prepare for litigation to our client. I think it's really exciting, and you can also work on some cutting edge areas of the law too, if a novel case presents itself. So I think that's great. And there's marketing and stuff too. I mean, you can go out and get new clients, which is really awesome. I mean, go out and represent the firm to new customers, and be proud of what it is that you do every day as a lawyer, and sell your services. And you can mentor younger associates, staff members, paralegals, and build a team of professionals to help the firm move forward. And so I think that's the real power of being at a firm. In a company, as in-house counsel, similarly, it's working with fantastic people. And for me, the majority of my clients, both in-house and at the firm, were international. And so I got to deal, or in the past, I've dealt with people from all around the world. At the company, it was literally working with people who were not American and didn't understand how the American legal system works. And so a lot of it is client education, sitting down with them and saying, no, this is why this is important. This is why I'm thinking about these kinds of issues, and kind of helping them understand what it is that we do, how I think about things affect the bottom line, or the deals that we're trying to do with clients and vendors and customers and stuff. And by the same token, an in-house position, you're dealing with people that most of them have nothing to do with the law. They're commercial people who are trying to sell the company's services or the products. There's accounting people who are really good with Excel, way better than I would ever be, and and are worried about closing the books, and making sure that everything is ship shape. There's the technical people, if you're doing research and development, the manufacturing people, the engineers, the folks that are really at the forefront of what it is that the company does every day. And sitting down with them, these are experts in their field, or people that have a completely different background to mine, and they've got completely different motivations than I do. Obviously everybody wants to help the company succeed in a safe and effective manner, but they're thinking about engineering problems, or they're thinking about solving some massive issue that they've got, or making the next generation of whatever it is the company does. And that's really exciting to talk to those folks, and then to help them create those things, and help them to market them, and help them to help the company move forward, dealing with the legal issues that surround all of that stuff. I think it's fantastic. And then also there's, a little bit more regularity, I think, in in-house practice, as far as the number of people that you deal with and the kinds of challenges that you face. It's a firehouse kind of approach, but that you have kind of a better, more global view of what it is that your company is trying to accomplish. So if you're expanding into a new area, or if you're trying to, gain market share in a particular business area, or if you're starting a new business line, those kinds of goals that require the work of many different people is an exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, no, thinking a little bit on the other side, what would you say are a few of like the worst things about litigation versus in-house?
Lawyers tend to be, or at least I tend to be, my own worst critic, and I think that a lot of people could say the same thing about about themselves as type A people who want to be successful. And as litigator, the challenge is taking the case, making it personal, making it, you take everything personally. A ruling doesn't go your way and you think, oh, how did I fail? Or any number of those kinds of things. I think that making the law personal to yourself and taking personal ownership of, it can get to you. It's also the mark of a very good lawyer and a very good person, because, in a service, I firmly believe that the law is a service, and it's also a calling, and it's not just a business. And so the very best lawyers think deeply about these topics, about ethical considerations, about how they affect real people, industries, real companies, real people on a day-to-day basis. The danger is that you make it way too personal, and you get too heavily personally invested in it, because it can affect your physical health, it can affect your mental stability, and all that stuff. And the same is true at a company. If you take personal responsibility for, oh my gosh, the company is not going to succeed this year because of me, because of that memo that I wrote or whatever. It can really start to grind you down. So that's the general thing. The general challenge, I think, is for lawyers to maintain perspective and to think that we do the best we can. And obviously the best that we can is governed by things like ethical rules and that kind of stuff. But we want to make sure that, you kind of keep that perspective and keep a healthy view of what it is the lawyers do. I think the bad part too is that at a law firm, whether you're successful or whether, you get a good result or a not so good result, or, your marketing efforts, that fully affects how the firm is doing. And so it's a little bit of pressure there to make sure that you're performing and make sure you're going out to get more business and doing a good job for your clients so that you have repeat business. The downside at companies are that the lawyers are a part of the whole. It's a cost center. It's not necessarily a profit center if you're in-house counsel. So, a lot of times you might have to you might make a legal recommendation and say, look, this is what I think is going to be the best way to mitigate this particular risk. And sometimes the commercial and the operational people, the people who have the decision-making capability, say, no, I think we're going to go this way. You think, well, okay, but that's going against my recommendation. But I think the perspective that you have to keep when you're in-house is there's a lot of different moving parts in a company. And so, and legal is a very, very, very important part of it, but it's not the only consideration. So, keeping a healthy perspective that maybe there's information that, you don't have, or considerations that you don't have that the people who are actually in the decision-making roles do have. And it's you're part of a bigger machine at a company than maybe you are at a law firm.
Right. And so what's like the earning potential of someone in litigation versus in-house?
The classic lawyer answer is it depends, right? But there's so many different factors. At a litigation boutique firm, I mean, if you score a big victory, then you might get the bonus structure depending on if you're a partner or an associate. In larger firms, as I understand it, there's more of a guaranteed share that each partner has. At smaller firms, it's kind of they split up the profits evenly, or however they do it. Associate pay at law firms, I think, is generally kind of set, and might get a raise every year as you're there. But then the bonus structure, depending upon how good a year the firm has, they might have a bonus structure where you can earn a lot more on a bonus if you have a big case. In-house, I think the pay is probably a little bit more set. At least in my experience, it has been. So, depending on the size of the company you go into, they could say, well, you were in wage grade, or I don't know, pay grade 2 or something. If there's, and so then you'll be a pay grade 3 person later on. I don't know. My sense is that corporate salaries are a little bit more set, and that maybe the raises are a little bit more driven by years in service rather than your success rate. Although there's a little bit, there's some companies that do that kind of a merit-based performance award as well. And even bigger companies have kind of profit sharing for all the employees, which is an interesting way to kind of look at it, and kind of akin to what a law firm does.
So what character traits would you say someone needs to possess to excel in your practice area?
I think the biggest thing is to be mentally flexible. And, certainly somebody that has a good ethical and moral center is absolutely key to being a good lawyer, regardless of practice area. But I think having the mental flexibility to consider other people's other perspectives and ways of doing business, particularly in the international arena that I tend to practice with the customers that I deal with, a lot of times it's being able to understand the fact that other people come by their perspectives honestly, or they come by their perspectives based on their experiences. So having the ability to consider other viewpoints and think about them rationally, and then consider the relative merits or drawbacks to those positions is extremely important. It's very important in litigation because you're always trying to get inside the mind of your opponent and to see what arguments they've got and how strong they are, and to think about them honestly about whether or not they've got a better argument than you do. And in the in-house realm, I think having that mental flexibility is really important because of all the factors that you are thinking about, that you have to think about as a in-house counsel, the business aspects of what it is that you're trying to do, or the contract that you're trying to sign. And of course, there are other people who do that, but it's kind of important for the in-house lawyer to understand that the various motivations that people have for getting a deal done. I think another thing that's really important is, we talked about the moral center, but to have kind of just a curiosity about different ways of, or different areas, different ways of doing things, and to keep that kind of like a perspective that you've got, that you want to learn everything you can about a practice area, or about a case, or about the product that you're trying to sell, or the vendor that you're trying to work with. I think that's definitely key.
Yeah. So, do you have any advice for someone who wants to follow in your career path?
The best advice that I can offer is to read as much as you can and learn as much as you can about a practice area. And certainly, like, the best tool is somebody who's already doing it. So you can, getting to know them, and getting to pick their brain about how to be a good litigator, or a good in-house counsel, or, intellectual property lawyer, or employment lawyer, immigration lawyer. And I would really recommend LinkedIn as a really good resource. I kind of discovered LinkedIn when I was starting out at the law firm. And of course, that was years ago, and LinkedIn was not really as well developed as it is now. But there are so many different free resources on LinkedIn that companies put out, that lawyers put out, for, that can help you kind of get acquainted with a new practice area. And you got to keep in mind too that the people who post on LinkedIn are people who want to connect with other folks. So there's at least the beginning, when they set up their LinkedIn account, they wanted to connect with other people. And so I generally find that by reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, I just happened upon your profile," or I read something that you wrote on this post or something, and it really struck a chord with me. I really was interested in it. Can I talk to you a little bit about it? I think most folks, if they're are absolutely willing to talk about it, because otherwise, why would they put it out there for everybody to see? So those two resources, like people who are actually in the business. If you don't know people who are in the business, then follow companies that do it, or follow firms that do it. One person that I know, she was coming from an area that, or from a previous, industry that had nothing to do with law whatsoever. She took a perspective of just calling lawyers, every lawyer she could find, just opening up phone book or Googling lawyers in her area, and then just start calling them, just talking to them. What do you do? How do you do it? How do you like it? How long have you been doing it? To kind of start building a network that way. For somebody like me, coming from my background, there would be no way that I would ever do that. But talking to her, I recognize how effective that was. And thinking about it from that perspective, I think, wow, I mean, why did that never occur to me to just call people and ask them how they, can you give me some of your time? And if you say, "Hey, can I schedule a 30-minute call with you?" Most lawyers are going to say, "Nope, that's half an hour of billable time I'm not going to get through." But if you say, "Hey, I'd just like to pick your brain, maybe get a cup of coffee or something like that, or just ask you a question about how it is that you do your business," I think most people are absolutely willing to do so. And some people aren't, but hey, there's many more people that are. So I would say network, 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 and learn as much as you can about various practice areas. The other thing is that we are all a product of our experiences, and so it's funny. I've kind of hopscotched from practice area to industry to like starting off in the military and doing what I do in house. But Upon reflection, every position that I've had, every job that I've had has kind of led me to where I am today. And so it's not just that you have to get an associate position at a big law firm to go to, another big law firm to make partner I think these days there's so much more flexibility in how people move from job to job and within a career there maybe has been in the past. And maybe it's just an attitude. Like I went to law school with people who were far younger than me, the millennials, who, and I guess I'm a millennial too, to be perfectly honest, but their perspective is, well, of course you'd move from job to job, which is a far different perspective if you think about it than where our grandparents were, where, if you get at a big company like IBM or something, you stay there for 50 years and they give you a nice watch and a retirement at the end of it. It's just a much different way of approaching a career. And so I think that's exciting. And tools like LinkedIn and some of the other social media platforms are really good for doing that. And industry meetings like continuing legal education or trade association meetings, if you're interested in a particular industry, not necessarily the legal aspects of it, but just if you're interested in oil and gas, going to an oil and gas conference, or if you're interested in immigration, going to some of the government immigration stuff that they put on. Those are ways to meet people who are in the business and determine whether or not it's something that you want to do. And the other thing that I would say is don't ever be scared of admitting to yourself that, I'm not really liking what I'm doing now. I'll never forget, I talked to a lawyer who I knew pretty well, and he worked on a brilliant lawyer. And I said, and he was just getting ready to retire. And I said, are you going to miss it? And he said, absolutely not. I have hated what I've done for 20 years. And I thought, what? And he said, yeah, there's so much pressure all the time. He said, if I had it to do all over again, I'd go be a doctor. I said, why? He said, because you still get to help people, but, eventually they go away and they live their lives rather than, continually badgering you for questions about the law. And I thought, wow. Wow. And this was a successful lawyer. And he just, and he thought, I wasn't really honest with myself about what I really, really wanted out of life. And so, and he said, and so my practice has been very successful and very happy, and I wouldn't change a thing except that I would change everything. I thought, whoa. On the one hand, he's got that perspective to be able to take a step back and realize that, maybe I should have done something else. On the other hand, he's mentally flexible enough to be able to do something that, generally speaking, he didn't like for a long time and be really good at it. So I think that being honest with yourself and being, thinking about what it is about your strengths and your personality and your character that make you well suited for a particular practice area, and then go in and doing that.
For sure. And I think that's a great place to end it. So thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. That's it for today. Thank you to our guest speaker, and thank you to all of you for listening to another episode of the Law Lives Project. If you're a prospective law student that's interested in speaking with attorneys one-on-one, check out leguplegal.com. Leg Up Legal is an online mentoring platform that connects prospective law students with attorney mentors. Sign up for a membership today to learn more about the practice of law and see if it's a good fit for you. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes or any other platform that you're listening on. If you have any questions or comments about anything you heard on the podcast, or if you have ideas for guest speakers, please contact me by emailing me and my team at info@leguplegal.com. Thanks again, and don't forget to tune in next week.